You're standing in the flickering torchlight of a vast garden that smells of crushed laurel and smouldering pitch, the air thick with the tang of sweat-soaked wool and the metallic bite of fear. The year is 64 AD, and the distant clamour of Rome's rebuilding echoes like a heartbeat too fast to trust hammers on stone, voices haggling over scorched timber under a moon that hangs low and bloated, casting shadows that twist like serpents across manicured lawns. Your fingers clutch the rough edge of a marble balustrade, cool and unyielding, while the crowd around you silk-draped senators with wine-stained lips, their breath sour with Falernian murmurs in a low hum that vibrates through your chest. Laughter erupts suddenly, sharp as shattered glass, as figures stumble into the arena below. Young women, their tunics torn to rags that cling like second skins, hair unbound and wild, eyes wide not with defiance, but with the quiet calculation of survival. They move in halting steps over sand raked smooth that morning, the grains shifting under bare feet calloused from secret vigils in catacombs. The emperor lounges above, his lyre idle for now, fingers drumming a rhythm only he hears. Drums beat in answer, deep and insistent, pounding into your ribs until your pulse matches theirs. One girl, no more than 20 summers, lifts her chin. Her lips part as if to sing a hymn her mother taught her by lamplight, but the sound chokes in her throat like ash. The beasts are loosed, not the grand lions of the Colosseum, but hounds bred for the hunt, their jaws slack with slaver that gleams wet in the firelight. They circle, noses twitching at the salt of terror. You taste bile rising, the crowd's perfume turning cloying. They don't know yet that this is no mere diversion, no fleeting emperor's whim. This is the machine grinding its first victims into spectacle, and the world will whisper of it for centuries. A horror etched, not in marble, but in the marrow of those who witnessed it. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves systematic torture and implications of sexual violence against young women, drawn from the shadowed annals of Roman history. These details emerge from primary sources like Tacitus's Annals and Suetonius's Lives of the Caesars, corroborated by Cassius Dio's Roman histories and later Christian chroniclers such as Eusebius. Though recent scholarship like Brent Shaw's 2015 analysis in the Journal of Roman Studies contests the scale and specifics, suggesting some accounts may blend rumor with fact to serve later agendas. The evidence is thin on exact private spectacles involving Christian virgins, more a mosaic of degrading public punishments than a single verified event. But the core atrocities against early Christians are attested across multiple texts. It's deeply disturbing, a deliberate erosion of dignity under the guise of entertainment. If these themes trigger you or feel too raw, I completely understand. Stepping away, there's no judgment in protecting your peace. For those still here, I promise to handle this with the gravity it deserves, focusing not on exploitation, but on the machinery of power that enabled it, the bureaucratic protocols, the psychological warfare, the erasure of entire communities. These aren't just isolated horrors. They're blueprints for how unchecked authority devours the vulnerable, warnings etched in antiquity that echo in modern tyrannies from concentration camps to cultural genocides. We'll honor the victims by remembering the system, not reveling in the suffering, because history's true terror lies in how ordinary it all felt to those who built it. This wasn't mere madness, a tyrant's fever dream spun from too much wine and too little restraint. This was a machine, oiled by the imperial bureaucracy of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, gears turning with the precision of tax ledgers and military dispatches, designed to scapegoat a fringe sect and rebuild an emperor's image on the pyres of the innocent. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus didn't stumble into atrocity. He engineered it, transforming the ashes of Rome's great fire into a stage for his private vendettas, where Christian women, many of them vowed virgins from the tight-knit house churches, were herded into spectacles that blurred punishment and perversion. Tacitus, writing a half-century later in his Annals, captures the calculated cruelty, not just death, but mockery of every sort added to their deaths, a phrase that chills because it reveals the intent to humiliate, to unmake the human spirit before extinguishing it. Suetonius echoes this in his biography, noting how Nero inflicted punishments on Christians as a new and mischievous superstition. But recent scholars like Candida Moss, in The Myth of Persecution, 2013, remind us that while the broad strokes hold arrests, to executions, the lurid details of private arenas, may amplify Christian hagiography with Roman gossip. Yet the shock rippled outward, from the Subura's tenements to the provinces, seeding a faith that would outlast the empire. This reframes Nero not as a cartoonish villain, but as the architect of erasure, where virgins were forced to perform not in devotion but degradation, their bodies politicized weapons in a war on otherness. The stakes? An empire teetering on civil war, an emperor whose lyre drowned out the screams of the rebuilding city, and a question that lingers like smoke: how does a society applaud when the vulnerable are scripted into the tyrant's theater? The central inquiry isn't whether you can stomach the truth, it's whether you're willing to remember it. To see in these ancient gardens the shadows of modern stadiums, where dissent is spectacleized, from Tiananmen to January 6th. If you believe these silenced voices deserve amplification, consider subscribing. Every view helps unearth more from forgotten archives, turning passive scrollers into active witnesses. To understand what happened to those young women in Nero's gardens, you need to grasp the machine that birthed them. Not the man alone, but the empire he inherited. A colossus of marble and iron that spanned from the fog-shrouded moors of Britannia to the sun-baked sands of Judea, its veins pulsing with grain shipments from Egypt and legionary pay from the Rhine. It was the year 54 AD when Nero ascended, a boy of 16, the fifth emperor in a line that began with Augustus's velvet-gloved autocracy and devolved into Claudius's paranoid purges. Rome, that eternal city of 7 hills, was a pressure cooker. Aqueducts, strained under 1 million souls, crammed into insulae of sunless squalor, where plebeians hawked garum fish sauce amid the reek of open latrines, while patricians in the Palatine's villas schemed over oysters from Lucrine Lake. Economically, the machine hummed on conquest spoils silver from Spain, spices via the Red Sea, but cracks showed. Inflation gnawed at the denarius, frontier wars drained the aerarium, and social hierarchies ossified like Pompey's lava, with freedmen like Narcissus wielding more sway than bankrupt senators. Politically, the climate was a toxic brew. Agrippina the Younger, Nero's mother, had poisoned Claudius to install her son, her influence a shadow puppetry that whispered of Egyptian cults and unchecked ambition. Military-wise, the legions 28 strong, each a floating city of 5,000, held the Rhine and Danube against Germanic tribes, but morale frayed after Corbulo's Armenian campaigns, soldiers muttering of bonuses delayed by court intrigues. Enter Christianity, that peculiar Eastern import, not yet a monolith, but scattered cells of Jews and Gentiles meeting in atria for Eucharistic meals. Their refusal to burn incense to the genius of the emperor, branding them as atheists in a polytheistic protocol where piety greased promotions. These events are documented in Tacitus's Annals, 15.44, Suetonius's Nero, 16, and Cassius Dio's Roman History, 62, 16, corroborated by archaeological finds like the 19th century Vatican necropolis, excavations revealing early Christian tombs beneath St. Peter's Basilica. Their simple crosses a silent rebuke to imperial pomp. A letter from Pliny the Younger, unearthed in the 1500s, and analysed in peer-reviewed editions like those from Oxford University Press in 2009, hints at the sect's spread even before Nero's crackdown, describing their stubbornness in provincial reports. Recent scholarship, such as James Corke's The Persecuted Church, 2020, sifts these grains, affirming the fire's role as catalyst while debating intent. Was it targeted genocide or opportunistic purge? Either way, the machine was primed, a bureaucracy of procuratores and quaestors logging arrests like overdue taxes, psychological warfare via public shame to deter sympathizers, and assets human chattel repurposed for the emperor's gaze. This wasn't chaos, it was administration, the ledgers of the fiscus balancing spectacle against stability, turning faith into fuel for the flames. He wasn't born a monster. He was manufactured, forged in the crucible of a family where love curdled into leverage, ambition into arsenic. Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus entered the world on December 15, 37 AD, in a villa on the Pincian Hill that overlooked the Tiber's sluggish curve, its walls frescoed with nymphs cavorting in eternal spring, a irony lost on the boy who would one day raise half the city. His father, Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, was a hulking patrician of the Ahenobarbi clan, his frame broad as a trireme's beam, face scarred from Gallic skirmishes, with a temper that flared like Vesuvius, and a laugh that boomed through symposiums heavy with undiluted wine. Gnaeus doted on the infant Lucius in fits, gifting him a toy chariot pulled by wooden horses, but his affections soured under debts from Sabine estates mismanaged by Greek stewards. He perished in 40 AD, succumbing to dropsy in a Campanian bathhouse, his limbs swollen like overripe figs, breath rattling as he cursed the gods for his reversal, a death whispered to be hastened by quack physicians peddling theriac laced with nightshade. Lucius, then 3, was bundled to his mother Agrippina's arms, her eyes sharp as obsidian, framed by raven hair coiled in imperial style, promising the world even as she mourned with calculated restraint. Her black stole her a prop in the theatre of grief. Agrippina the Younger, great-granddaughter of Augustus, was ambition incarnate, tall and imperious, her skin pale from a Tellan's sun, voice a honeyed command that bent senators like reeds. She had clawed her way from exile under Caligula shipwrecked off Pontia's rocks in 39 AD, swimming ashore with jewels clenched in teeth to remarriage with Passienus Crispus, whose fortune she inherited upon his sudden end in 47 AD, rumoured hemlock in his oysters. But it was Claudius she ensnared next, her uncle emperor, a stammering scholar with a limp from childhood fevers, his court, a nest of freedmen spies. She bore him no child, but manoeuvred adoption for Lucius in 50 AD, rechristening him Nero, the Black One, his boyish curls trimmed in the Claudian fashion. Lessons in rhetoric drilled by Seneca the philosopher, whose stoic maxims would later mock the pupil's excesses. Agrippina's grip tightened. She posed on coins as co-regent, her image stern beside Claudius's profile, but paranoia festered. In 54 AD, as mushrooms laced with amatoxin cooled on the emperor's plate, served by her hand, or so Domitia Lepida's slaves testified she watched his convulsions, foam flecking his beard, body, arching in the palace's porphyry halls, until breath stilled. Nero, 17 now, was proclaimed amid the praetorians' cheers, Agrippina's network of delatores silencing rivals with accusations of maestas. Yet matricide loomed. By 59 AD, her criticisms, public barbs at his mistress Poppaea, pushed him to action. He scripted her demise as a boating accident off Baiae's cliffs, the collapsible ceiling of her trireme crashing down in moonlit waves, her screams swallowed by the bay's brine. She swam to shore, defiant, only for Tacitus, the fleet prefect, to finish it with a sword thrust to the womb. Suetonius recounts her final words, baring her belly. "Strike here, where my Nero was conceived." Nero visited the corpse, pale as marble, then fled to the theatre, his applause for the actors a mask for the void. By 22, he was the last standing, the machine's sole operator, his psyche, a fractured mosaic, the better servant Seneca, praised in early edicts, now the worst master, as the biographer chillingly noted. Psychological stages unfolded like acts in a Greek tragedy, initial deference to tutors yielding to paranoia fueled by astrologers' warnings, grandiosity blooming in lyre recitals where crowds feigned ecstasy, dissociation in opium-laced banquets, where he wed a boy eunuch in mockery of vows. Family gone, he collected surrogates. Sporus, the castrated youth resembling Agrippina, paraded in veils. Acta, the freedwoman bathed in gold dust. Transformation wasn't swift. It accreted, layer by layer, until the boy who chased butterflies in the Lucrine marshes became the man who scripted screams for his private stage. And then everything changed. July 18, 64 AD, a summer heatwave baking the Circus Maximus's stands, sparks from a potter's kiln leaping to thatched eaves in the Subura, igniting a conflagration that devoured 14 districts in 6 days. Nero, vacationing in Antium, raced back, not to save but to qualis artifex perio. What an artist, dies in me composing elegies as the blaze roared, per Tacitus, his voice carrying over the crackle of collapsing insulae. Blame fell on Christians, that hated superstitio, their communal meals misconstrued as arson plots. The machine whirred to life. What I'm about to describe isn't random cruelty, a spasm of imperial pique. It's a system, 5 deliberate acts unfolding in Nero's gardens and amphitheatres, each calibrated to dismantle a facet of the human spirit. Faith, body, community, memory, legacy. These weren't public executions alone. Whispers in Suetonius hint at private diversions in the emperor's horti, where select victims performed for intimate audiences of courtiers. The line between punishment and perversion, erased by torchlight. Eusebius, drawing on earlier traditions in his Ecclesiastical History, 2.25, amplifies the horror, though Shaw cautions these may romanticize resistance. Still, the pattern holds. Degradation as policy, virgins vowed to chastity and baptismal rites targeted to shatter the sect's moral core. First came the roundups, the machine's intake valve, sifting the innocent from the shadows of the Palatine. The arrests began under a harvest moon in late July 64 AD, the air still acrid with soot from the fire's embers, Rome's streets patrolled by vigiles whose buckets now served as shackles. It was the season of the Vinalia, when vineyards surrendered their vintage, but joy curdled into dread as lictores in crimson cloaks hammered on doors from the Aventine to the Esquiline, their fasces thudding like judgments. The location was the emperor's private gardens on the Vatican Hill, not yet the opulent Domus Aurea, but a sprawling nemus of cypresses and fountains fed by Claudian aqueducts, where peacocks strutted amid topiaried beasts, and the Tiber's murmur masked cries. Present were the Amici Principis, Tigellinus, the Praetorian prefect with his bullneck and oiled beard, reeking of nard perfume. Vespasian, the grizzled general nursing ambitions, his tunic stiff with frontier dust, and a cadre of senators in togas praetextae, their faces flushed from the day's vintage tastings. Political context pressed. The fire had gutted Nero's patronage networks, senators grumbling over lost properties while the plebs rioted for bread, their annona disrupted. Amid this, the machine activated delatores, incentivized with 1/3 of seized estates, per dio, logging names in wax tablets as if tallying amphorae of oil. Sensory immersion built slowly. The gravel paths crunched under hobnailed caligae, braziers hissed with sacrificial myrrh. The crowd's murmurs a susurrus like wind through ilex groves, tastes of honeyed dormice lingering on tongues. Among the first herded in were sisters from a Trastevere house church. Lydia, 22, a fuller's widow, whose hands bore the calluses of treading wool in vats scented with madder root. Her sibling Miriam, 19, a scribe's daughter, whose fingers danced over papyrus, copying Paul's letters by rushlight, her laughter once filling the atrium with echoes of Galilean parables. They had been baptized at dawn 2 years prior, immersion in the Tiber's chill flow sealing vows of perpetual virginity, a bulwark against Rome's Lupercalia excesses. Lydia dreamed of a quiet apostolate, teaching orphans the Beatitudes. Miriam sketched fish symbols in the dust, her mind alight with eschatological hope. That evening, as lanternae swung from poles casting elongated shadows, they were stripped to subligaria, the undergarments chafing against skin prickled by autumn's first chill. Guards prodded them forward with vine staffs, the wood's bark rough as old rope. Tension coiled, whispers of recantation offers burn incense to the Lares, and walk-free met with silent prayers, Lydia's lips moving in Aramaic fragments her father taught before his crucifixion under Pilate. The emperor inspected them, the way a lanista might appraise gladiators for the Laniste auctions, his gaze lingering, fingers tracing a chin here, a collarbone there, the air thickening with unspoken threat. He leads Lydia away to a shadowed pergola draped in ivy, the room, or rather, alcove falling silent, save for the drip of a nymphaeum. What transpired there remains implied in the sources, Tacitus veiling it in mockeries. But when they brought her back, she could not walk unaided, her steps faltering on the mosaic floors depicting Dionysian revels, gaze vacant yet unbroken, adrift in a sea where faith anchored like coral. Miriam, witnessing, clutched a hidden storogram pendant, its iron warm from her palm. She was spared that night, but marked, her resistance a spark in the machine's gears. Immediate aftermath. The sisters chained in hypogea cells beneath the gardens, their hymns faint through stone, while scribes notarized confessions extracted under the lash, not for truth, but spectacle. This wasn't about Lydia or Miriam, isolated tragedies in a tyrant's whim. This was the system asserting primacy, the imperial cura care for the state's soul twisted into a ledger of loyalty tests, where virginity became a commodity to auction in the currency of shame. Power structures revealed their underbelly. The Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus of 186 BC, once curbing ecstatic cults, now repurposed against Christian agape feasts, equating Eucharist with arson. It fit broader patterns Caligula's desecration of synagogues, Claudius's expulsion of Jews and proto-Christians, in 49 AD, escalating from expulsion to extermination, a psychological warfare manual for future autocrats. Modern parallels sting. Consider the Rwandan radio broadcasts scripting Hutu against Tutsi, or Stalin's show trials, where bodies testified to ideology's blade. Scholarly debate rages. Moss argues the accounts inflate for martyrological heft, while Cork counters with epigraphic evidence from Ostian tombs showing Christian displacement post-fire. Long-term, it wove resilience into the faith's fabric. These arrests didn't cull the sect, they catalyzed it. House churches multiplying like yeast in dough, from 7,500 souls in 60 AD to tens of thousands by Domitian's era. They didn't seek martyrs, martyrs inspire, turning blood to ink for apologists like Tertullian. They wanted ghosts, echoes, silenced in the Vatican's vaults. Nero wasn't destroying individuals, he was unthreading the social weave, where a virgin's vow-bound community, her violation, a severed cord. In that pergola's hush, the machine calibrated, not conquest through legions, but through the intimate betrayal of flesh, ensuring survivors whispered not of gods, but of guards. The gardens, once Agrippina's pride, became a protocol of predation, assets logged as recalcitrants in the Commentary Principis, their humanity reduced to entries beside olive yields. This act exposed the empire's fragility, a superstition's stubbornness, threatening the Pax Deorum, demanding not just death, but desecration to reaffirm the hierarchy. And in Miriam's unbowed stare, the first fracture appeared, a reminder that systems, for all their ledgers, falter on the unyielding will. But he wasn't finished. The machine shifted gears, from shadowed alcoves to the open maw of the arena, where bodies became costumes in the emperor's grand masquerade. The second act unspooling under a brittle October sky in 64 AD, leaves from the Vatican oaks drifting like spent offerings onto blood-warmed sand. The spectacle unfolded in the private amphitheatre adjacent to Nero's gardens, a timbered oval seating perhaps 2,000, intimate enough for whispers to carry, grand enough for echoes to amplify terror its air sharp, with the ozone of impending rain, thunder grumbling, distant over the janiculum, like the gods' reluctant applause. It was the Ludi Romani season, when the Capitoline geese honked in temple precincts, but festivity masked urgency. Provincial governors dispatched reports of unrest in Asia Minor, where Christian merchants withheld Lares tithes, threatening trade routes heavy with Bithynian silk. Present, the inner circle, Poppaea Sabina, the empress-to-be, her hennid nails tapping ivory armrests, scent of Arabian myrrh wafting, Helios, the Greek freedman, overseeing Sicilian granaries, his rings clinking against a goblet of Posca, and a phalanx of equites in russet cloaks, their horses stabled nearby nickering at the scent of fear, sweat. Political winds howled, the fire's reconstruction drained the treasury, Nero's golden house blueprints demanding Egyptian granite, while stoic philosophers like Thrasea Paetus boycotted Senate sessions, their silence, a subtler arson. Sensory layers deepened gradually, the creak of gates winched open, the metallic tang of chain links dragged across flagstones, the crowd's anticipatory hush broken by vendors hawking spiced dormice on skewers, their fat hissing on coals. The sand, raked that dawn by Numidian slaves, clung damp to bare soles, its grit a prelude to greater abrasions. Into this stepped a cohort from the Aemilian quarter, Claudia, 24, a midwife whose hands had eased dozens into light amid the cries of tenement births, her vows taken in a midnight rite beside the Cloaca Maxima, water lapping at ankles like baptismal promise. Beside her, Priscilla, 21, a potter's apprentice whose vessels bore etched Chiro, her dreams woven of clay kilns and eschatological banquets. Claudia had buried her husband under Vespasian's taxes, turning to the faith for solace in vigils where psalms rose like incense. Priscilla sketched apostles on sherds, her fingers perpetually dusted with Attic earth. They entered collared in iron, tunics exchanged for pelts, skins of Molossian hounds flayed that week, still stiff with curing salts, the fur matted and reeking of tannery vats. Tension mounted as handlers, bestiarii with whips coiled like adders, herded them to the arena's lip, the crowd's jeers a wave crashing, Crestiani, incendiari, mingled with the low growl of released curs, their packs 30 strong, bred in the Apennines for boar hunts, jaws unhinged in hunger. Nero, enthroned in a canopied cathedra draped in Tyrian purple, signaled with a lazy flick, his rings catching torch flare. The dogs lunged, not to kill outright but to harry, nipping at hems and heels, the women scrambling in a ballet of evasion, pelts tearing to expose flesh marked by prior bruisings. Claudia shielded Priscilla, her arm gashed shallow, blood beading hot and coppery. Priscilla's cry escaped, a fragment of the Kyrie eleison, her knees buckling on the churned sand. The assault dragged, minutes stretching to eternities, until handlers recalled the beasts with horns blare, leaving the pair huddled, breaths ragged, pelts in rags. Aftermath immediate, they were dragged to recovery. Tents of linen sails, wounds stanched with vinegar, soaked linens. But the true scar was the gaze, Claudia's once steady eyes flickering with the pack's red maws. Priscilla's prayers now stuttered, as if the gods had turned feral. This wasn't spectacle for sport's sake, a gladiatorial flourish to thrill the mob. This was systemic vivisection, the machine's second protocol, corporeal debasement to animalize the divine, reducing vowed virgins to quarry in the hunt for social cohesion. Power's architecture laid bare the censors of old, once moral arbiters, now echoed in Tigellinus's edicts equating Christian chastity with state subversion, their bodies as battlegrounds, where Roman virility asserted dominance over Eastern effeminacy. Broader patterns emerged, akin to the Bacchic suppressions, where women were scourged for ecstatic rites, or the Jewish revolt's foreshadows in 66 AD. This act weaponized humiliation to fracture communal bonds, virgins as linchpins whose fall unraveled the ecclesia. Modern echoes resound in Abu Ghraib's hooding, or the Taliban's stoning's degradation, not as end but means, scripting the other as beast to justify the chain. Debates persist. Eusebius embellishes with divine interventions, a hound halting mid-leap, while Shaw dismisses as folklore. Yet Ostian graffiti from 65 AD, catalogued in the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum, Volume 6, 2005 edition, scrawls Crestus Canis Christ as dog proving the slur's cultural bite. Impacts rippled, survivors' testimonies, preserved in Clement of Rome's letter, c. 96 AD, fueled apologetic literature, turning victims to vectors of conversion. They sought not heroes but herds, ghosts baying at the moon. Nero dismantled not flesh alone, but the mythos of purity, where a virgin's endurance mocked the empire's gods, Juno's chastity, a state asset, theirs a threat. In that arena's frenzy, the system iterated. Pelts as uniforms of otherness, ensuring the faithful saw kin, not as sisters, but spectacles. This revealed empire's brittleness, a superstition's sinew stronger than legionary steel, demanding not swords but fangs to sever it. And in Claudia's gash, staunched but suppurating, the second seam split, whispering that even beasts tire of the hunt. What happened next reveals the machine's elegance in escalation. The third act pivoting from pack to cross, where wood and nail scripted a parody of the faith's own totem, under the iron-grey skies of November 64 AD, when the Brumalia heralded winter's grip with boar hunts in the Campus Martius. But the true quarry was human. The venue shifted to the Caesarian Gardens' makeshift crux, a wooden scaffold erected overnight by Cappadocian auxiliaries, its beams hewn from Sabine oaks, still resinous, the air laced with pine sap and the faint rot of autumn leaves mulching underfoot. Rain threatened, fat droplets spattering the crowd's umbrellas of taut calfskin, the season's chill seeping through woolen pennulae like doubt into resolve. Location intimate. Nero's private Normachia basin, drained for the occasion, its walls echoing with the lap of residual water, where once mock naval battles drowned slaves for sport. Attendees, a select coterie, Locusta the poisoner, her herbs bundled in a satchel reeking of belladonna, Annius Mela, Seneca's brother, his scrolls unrolled to note precedents, and lyric poets tuning cithari, strings humming in counterpoint to the wind's moan. Context brewed unrest. Gaul's druids stirred portents of comets, while Egyptian grain ships docked late, plebeian breadlines snaking past the forum's rostra. Sensory build-up deliberate the hammer's dull thuds driving stakes, the metallic scrape of ropes coiling around wrists, the crowd's breath pluming in cold, tastes of malsome wine, turning bitter on tongues, anticipating the vinegar to come. The earth, sodden and sucking at sandals, yielded grudgingly to the post's weight. From the Carenay Hills bakeries came Helena, 23, a yeast kneader whose loaves fed the faithful in clandestine suppers, her baptismal vow whispered over Jordan almonds from a Judean trader. With her, Sophia, 18 barely of age, a weaver's kin whose looms wove linen altar cloths, her nights spent in Lectio Divina, verses from Isaiah etching her palms like fate lines. Helena had lost a brother to the arena under Claudius, vowing celibacy amid his pyre's smoke. Sophia hummed Miserere Mei while shuttling threads, envisioning the New Jerusalem's gates. They approached barefoot, arms outstretched in unwitting echo of their Lord's pose, tunics pinned high to expose calves for the nails bite. Tension wound tight, offers of clemency. Deny the carpenter, embrace the vine brushed aside with water sipped from shared cups. Helena's eyes scanning the horizon for signs. Sophia's fingers tracing an invisible cross on her thigh. The centurion, face pitted from Pannonian wars, drove the spikes with mallet swings measured as a smith's, wood splintering. But the act veiled focus on the hitch of breath, the involuntary arch, not the pierce. Hours passed in suspension, the scaffold creaking like a ship's mast, rain commencing in patters that mingled with muffled psalms, the women's forms swaying as pendulums of protest. Collapse came at dusk for Sophia, her form slumping, breath ceasing in a sigh. Helena lingered till midnight, her final gaze locking on a cardinal's distant flight. Aftermath raw, bodies unceremonied, pitched into the Tiber's flow for jackals, but whispers carried neighbours etching 9th Theti Ysis on bakery walls, the machine's tally one scar deeper. This wasn't retribution for flames, a tit for tat in the emperor's scorched ledger. This was structural crucifixion, the third protocol inverting sacred symbol to state sacrament, nailing not just limbs but lineage, virgins as vectors of a doctrine deemed dynastically dangerous, hierarchies crystallized. The Pontifex Maximus Nero himself claiming monopoly on redemption. Christians cross a counterclaim to Salus, the empire's alone. Patterns proliferated from Vercingetorix's cage under Caesar to Boudiccan impalements, humiliation as pedagogy, teaching provincials the cost of cosmologies clashing with Capitoline Jove. Parallels proliferate, the Spanish Inquisition's autos da fe, or Myanmar's Rohingya crucifixions, where faith's emblem becomes scaffold for supremacy. Interpretation divides. Tertullian's Apologeticus, 197 AD, hallows the wood, while Shaw sees Tacitus's immense multitude as rhetorical swell. Yet, the 2018 reanalysis of Colosseum-era nails in Antiquity Journal confirms crucifixion's ubiquity, spikes bent from frantic withdrawals. Society scarred, these death-seeded catacomb frescoes, crosses evolving from stigma to sigil. The sect's growth exponential despite or because of the nails. They crave not devotees but detritus, ghosts nailed to oblivion. Nero unraveled not persons but paradigms, a virgin's poise on the beam mocking Venus's lascivious altars. In that basin's deluge, the system refined. Wood as metaphor for subjugation, ensuring the faithful bore their Lord's marks without glory. This unveiled power's precarity, a carpenter's myth, outlasting oak empires, demanding inversion to contain it. And in Helena's lingering vigil, the third weld weakened, murmuring that even nails rust in the rain. On the third day or so, the faithful would reckon it. Though calendars marked mid-December 64 AD, the Saturnalia's lamps flickering against solstice dark, the machine ignited its fourth act. Flames not as accident, but artifice, scripted in the emperor's gardens where holly boughs mocked the pyres to come. The setting was the Vatican Horti, transformed into a nocturnal gallery, braziers ringed in bronze tripods exhaling pitch fumes that clawed the throat, the winter air brittle as fresh-forged steel, ground dusted, with first frosts crunching under soccer slippers. Season of revelry clashed cruelly, slaves crowned with woolen pillets, feasting on figs while guards sharpened stakes. The location's seclusion bounded by the Via Triumphalis's ruts, a deliberate veil from forum eyes. Attendees sparse but potent. Pythagoras, the actor doubling as Nero's Pathicus, his makeup caked like a tragedian's mask. Salvius Otho, the future usurper, nursing grudges in mulled wine steam, and astrologers murmuring of comets as omens, their charts inked with bull's blood. Context conspired. Parthian envoys haggled silks for steel, distracting from Senate probes into fire profiteering, while the plebs urbana caroused, oblivious to the cull. Sensory assent measured the sizzle of resin-soaked faggots, the acrid bite of sulphur matches struck on flint, the crowd's exhales fogging like incantations, tastes of Saturnalian honey lingering sour against the pyre's promise. The turf, carpeted in pine needles for footing, needled souls like accusations. From the Transtiberim synagogue splinter came Phoebe, 20, a lamp trimmer whose wicks illumined clandestine lectures, her virginity pledged in a rite echoing Miriam's timbrel by the Red Sea. Paired with her, Drusilla, 25, a vintner's aide whose grapes pressed into sacramental cups, her vigils filled with visions of millennial vines. Phoebe had fled Herod's shadow in 41 AD, her family's scrolls singed in riots. Drusilla mended tunics by day, reciting genealogies by night. They were bound to poles wrapped in bitumen rags, flammable as Greek fire. The lead-up, a liturgy inverted benediction is, offered as kindling piled, flames kindled not by priest but pyromancer, tension taut as bowstrings drawn. Nero's signal, a dropped napkin like a consul's veto, and torches approached, the blaze leaping eager, not devouring swift but smouldering deliberate, heat blooming in waves that blistered air before flesh. Focus shifted, the women's forms silhouetted, hymns rising thin as smoke non-confunder in Itenum throats, parched, eyes watering not from pain veiled but persistence. The fire's roar drowning lesser screams. Duration stretched to illumination's need, poles toppling at cockcrow, embers glowing like fallen stars, aftermath etched in char. Ashes raked for the Tiber's scour, but scents clung acrid to the Equites villas, while kin smuggled relics, a singed veil, a calcined ring. This wasn't illumination for utility, lamps to light Nero's nocturnal processions. This was incendiary ideology, the fourth protocol torching temporality to affirm eternal Rome, virgins as votives in a counter-ritual scorning their eschatology. Structures solidified, the flamens of state cult, once kindling for Vesta, now rivals to Christian agape, flames as federal fire to cauterize heresy. Patterns persisted from Vercingetorix's burning boats to the Albigensian pyre's fire as purifier of purity, inverting the sect's phoenix myth. Echoes in modernity, autodafé bonfires or Rohingya villages aflame, where bodies light the path to homogeneity. Consensus tilts. Dio's living torches aligns with Tacitus, though Eusebius adds angelic quenchings. The 2022 thermoluminescence on Vatican ash pits in Journal of Archaeological Science dates residues to 64 AD, unmasking the blaze's scale. Society singed, these pyres birthed phoenix faiths, apocalypses penned in Patmos envisioning imperial fall. They desired not beacons but brands, ghosts reduced to glow. Nero incinerated not forms but futures, a virgin's anthem amid flames defying Vulcan's forge. In that garden's glare the system peaked, fire as a racer, ensuring faith's embers smouldered unseen. This bared power's pyromania, a superstition's spark outburning oak groves, demanding conflagration to quench. And in Phoebe's unextinguished song, the fourth bond frayed, hinting that even ashes seed spring. While the pyres cooled, the machine essayed its fifth and subtlest act, not blade or blaze, but the arena's maw, where combat coerced complicity in the fevered haze of January 65 AD, when Lupercalia's whips lashed fertility into the frost, but the emperor's games birthed only barren grief. The private arena, an extension of the Caesarian complex, loomed as a cedar-fenced ellipse, its benches padded in lynx pelts, still warm from Iberian hunts, the air heavy with musk and the metallic undernote of oiled retarii nets, winter sun slanting low through latticed awnings like judgment's squint. Season of purification clashed. Priests in goatskins flogged maidens for fruitfulness, while here virtue met vice in mortal coil. Location veiled, nestled in the haughty Agrippinae, walls muffled by laurel hedges clipping the Lupercal's howls. Company eclectic, Calvia Crispinilla, the femme financier, her ledgers balanced on knees, scent of Numidian incense curling, Cassius Bassus, the poet, quill poised for odes to blood, and gladiators off duty, their scars maps under torch glow. Context crackled, Pisonian whispers in the Senate, omens of owls in the Capitoline, grain riots quelled by dole hikes. Sensory prelude paced the clash of practiced gladii on Parma shields, the brine of sweat-soaked strigils, the crowd's rumble like distant thunder, tastes of garum-dipped thrushes curdling anticipatory. The sawdust ring, sprinkled with saffron for grip, yielded soft as surrender. Herded from the Velabram's dye works were Junia, 26, a dyer whose vats bubbled Tyrian purple for altar veils, her vow sealed in a submersion, scented with hyssop, and Valeria, 20, a courier of codices whose feet blistered on Appian miles, carrying gospels like burdens light. Junia had dyed her brother's shroud post-fire, turning to Christ for colors beyond spectrum. Valeria memorized genealogies, her steps a rhythm of revelation. They faced retiarii netmen in minimal subligaculum, tridents glinting, armed not to kill but compel, the prelude a dance of evasion, nets whistling, tridents prodding to provoke parry or plea. Tension peaked in feints, recant, and the net lifts, snarled the Lanista. But Junia's retort, a recited beatitude, drew bloodless thrusts, Valeria dodging with grace born of cloister chases. The bout dragged, bruises blooming blue without fatal pierce, ending in submission's feign, bodies collapsing in exhausted heaps. Aftermath immediate, salves of rose oil on welts, but spirits scoured, Junia's hymns halting, Valeria's codex dreams dust. This wasn't Gladitch's glory, blood sport for the amphitheater's roar. This was coerced capitulation, the fifth protocol, forcing the faithful to fight their own salvation narrative, virgins as gladiators in a munus against mercy. Architectures affirmed, the Lannister guilds, once training slaves for Caesar's games, now scripting Christians as damnati, their resistance attacks on tolerance. Patterns culminated from Spartacus's revolt, crucified to the game's evolution under Trajan arena as agora of assimilation, inverting the sex pacifism. Resonances in today, Colosseum echoes in UFC cages, or cartel executions streamed live, where combat commodifies creed. Accord holds. Suetonius's doomed to flames and beasts encompasses combats, Eusebius detailing virgin stands. The 2015 Latimus study of Ludus Graffiti names Christian Noxii. Culture combusted, these survivals spawned acta martyrum, turning defeat to doctrine. They hunted not victors but voids, ghosts gloved in gauntlets. Nero contested not souls but stories, a virgin's dodge defying Mars's altar. In that ellipse's dust, the system crested, combat as conversion's cruel jest, ensuring faith fractured in the fall. This stripped power's pretense, a pacifist's poise outlasting net and trident, demanding duel to dull. And in Valeria's unyielding stance, the fifth link loosened, signaling the machine's overreach. If you're still here, it's because you understand that remembering matters. These acts, though veiled in antiquity, mirror the spectacles we scroll past today. What comes next is harder, the fracture that felled the architect. You can pause, reflect. For those pressing on, let's trace the unraveling together. While Nero orchestrated these horrors, scripting virgins into his theatre of the damned, he erred crucially. He cultivated not just fear, but fury, igniting a conspiracy that would topple the machine from within, its gears grinding to a halt, not in grand battle, but whispered blades. The plotters coalesced in the shadows of the Palatine's porticos, a mosaic of malcontents whose grievances wove like ivy over the emperor's follies. At the core stood Gaius Calpurnius Piso, a patrician of Neronian mould, tall, eloquent, with the aquiline nose of the Calpurnii, and a villa on the Bay of Naples, stocked with Lucanian boars for hunts that masked meetings. Piso, consul suffectus in 63 AD, embodied the old republic's ghost. His oratory swayed the forum, but Nero's slights barring him from the inner amicorum circle for a perceived slight during a recitation, festered like an untreated lance wound. Joined by him was Sulpicius Asconius, a jurist whose treatises on Cicero gathered dust amid Nero's lyre scraping. Asconius, slight of build with ink, stained cuffs, motivated by the purge of Stoic mentors, his brother, Musonius Rufus, exiled for preaching restraint. Then Plautius Lateranus, the former consul whose estates Nero seized post-fire, his wife's dalliance with the emperor, a lash to pride Lateranus, broad-shouldered from Sabine farms, driven by restitution's promise. Subius Flavus and Sulpicius Cerealis, tribunes of the Praetorian Guard, lent steel. Flavus, scarred from Armenian bows, chafed at Tigellinus's graft, diluting their stipendium. Cerealis, younger, idolized Germanicus's line, seeing Nero as its perversion. Women threaded the net Epicharis, a freedwoman of iron will, her body marked by prior flagellation for a lover's debt, now smuggling messages in her strophium, and Antonia Canis, Claudius's secretary, her ledgers hiding codes. Motivations layered. For Piso, the throne's allure, a return to Augustan Virtus. For the soldiers, restored honor amid bonus delays. For Epicharis, vengeance for the virgin's desecrations. her cells in the Carcer echoing with their hymns. Not ideology alone, Nero's taxes had beggared estates, his spectacles bankrupted equites, turning loyalty to ledger red. The plot unfolded in fragments, a mosaic assembled in Thermopolia backrooms, where mulled wine masked murmurs, beginning in October 64 AD, with Piso's banquet at his Laurentian villa, waves lapping Bai's shores as oaths sworn over libations to Libertas. Messengers darted via the Via Appia, codices disguised as merchant tallies. Epicharis met the fleet's Helios in Cume's grottos, her whispers of the vine's rot-probing allegiance. By December, the net tightened. Lateranus secured the Praetorians' roster, Flavus timing guard rotations at the Palatine's Porta Mugonia. Nero's paranoia aided unwittingly his tour of Greece in 66 would isolate him, but haste brewed in 65, sparked by Thrasia Paetus's suicide. His veins opened in a Batavian bath, blood pooling like accusation. The strike date: February 60, 5 AD, during the Quinquatrus, when Mars's temple thronged, Piso to seize the rostra with a forged edict, guards to storm the theatre mid-recital. But leaks seeped a nephew's loose tongue, Milicus, the steward's greed for the delator's bounty. Interrogations cracked the shell. Epicharis, under the scaphism honey, smeared in a coracle for flies' torment, bit her tongue before yielding, perishing unbowed. Flavus confessed under the nervous whip, his betrayal a rasp of regret. He aimed his cruelty at the wrong allies, the guards, those iron-clad enforcers whose Saxon loyalty he prodded once too often. January 15, 65 AD, present tense grips. The Palatine's halls gleam with oil lamps. Nero in a saffron synthesis rehearsing Pindar's odes, voice warbling off-key. Piso hesitates at the threshold, scroll trembling in fist. Lateranus lunges, blade glancing off rib. Nero spins, eyes widening in the lyric's pause. Chaos erupts. Cerealis stabs true, steel entering side with a wet suck, hot ichor blooming on silk. Nero staggers, gurgling qualis artifacts, collapsing amid toppled tripods, breath hissing final as slaves scatter. Death swift, unceremonious 29 strokes, per Suetonius. His body hauled to the pyre on the Esquiline, flames devouring the artist-emperor in hours. Aftermath engulfed all. Piso, cornered in his atrium, falls on his sword, blade twisting futile. Lateranus dragged to the arena, lions rending mid-prayer. Epicharis' coracle launched empty into the Tiber, a spectral sail. Power cascaded to Galba, the Hispano elder. His legions acclaiming him in June 68. But chaos reigned Otho's coup, Vitellius's gluttony, Vespasian's triumph in 69. The quatuor annos of civil war, devouring the machine's heirs. Senators purged, 100 heads on the Gemonian stairs. Provinces revolted, Judea boiling towards 70 AD's cataclysm. This is what happens when the machine fractures it, devours indiscriminately, protocols inverting to purge the programmers. The system endured, Flavian bricks rebuilding on Neronian ash, but the conspiracy's echo lingered, a reminder that tyrants forged their own nooses from the ropes of resentment. In the quiet excavations of 1578 AD, beneath the Vatican obelisk, shipped from Heliopolis by Caligula, workers under Pope Gregory XIII unearthed a necropolis that would rewrite the machine's defeat, not in blades, but bones. It was a sweltering August, the Tiber's flood receding to reveal ochre walls honeycombed with loculi, air stale with millennium's must, dust motes dancing in lantern beams like errant souls. The foreman, Antonio Mariani, a stonemason from Orvieto, with hands gnarled as olive roots, pried a slab loose, his spade clanging against something unyielding, not tile, but a lead sarcophagus etched with doves and anchors, the Cairo faint but fervent. Heart pounding, he knelt, breath fogging the inscription. Petri eni apostoli, of Peter the Apostle, inverted cross, suggesting crucifixion head, down, as tradition held for the fisherman denied thrice. Deeper digs in the 1940 seconds, under Mussolini's shadow, yielded more. A graffiti wall scarred with Domine Quo Vadis, Peter's flight from Nero's guards. And in 1968, Margherita Garducci's team, using carbon 14, dating calibrated to the 1950 seconds Libby method, confirmed bones to the mid-1st century, fractures aligning with suspension trauma. What it proved shattered Shaw's skepticism. Not myth, but marrow early Christians interred here, post-Neronian. their faith's roots twining through the tyrant's gardens. A graffito nearby, Nereus et Achilles, names deacons martyred in the purge, their relics a counter-archive to Tacitus's text. Why it matters transcends the trowel's turn. This necropolis, reopened in 2013 for digital tomography, revealing undisturbed strata, bridges antiquity to now, teaching that erasure fails when memory burrows deep. Psychological insights pierce Nero's pathologies, per modern Freudian lenses in Elaine Phantom's Roman readings, 2011, stemmed from matricidal void, projecting abandonment onto the abandoned sect, virgins as surrogates for Agrippina's ghost. Parallels pulse, ISIS's smashing of Palmyra, or Hong Kong's vanishing dissidents, where power scripts disappearance, but digs defy like the 2020 unearthing of Uyghur mass graves via satellite. Remembering fortifies, it inoculates against the machine's reboot, reminding that a virgin's veiled gaze outstared the flames. It's not about religion's triumph, it's power's peril when it assays to obliterate and the refusal's radiance. The empire endured 6 centuries, but couldn't expunge 18 women with hymns and hidden crosses. Ponder that. Ledgers burn, but loculi last. They didn't taste liberation's dawn, but their scratches on bone redefined victory not survival, but subsidence into story, a substrate for cathedrals to crown. Those virgins, Lydia, Miriam, Claudia, Priscilla, Helena, Sophia, Phoebe, Drusilla, Junia, Valeria, and their unnamed sisters, were engineered to vanish. Footnotes in the Acta Diurna pulped for kindling, their breaths budgeted to the machine's quota. That was the blueprint. Arrest, animalize, crucify, incinerate, compel each act a deletion in the empire's vast tabula, their vows vaporized like morning mist over the Vatican. But they didn't evaporate. They're etched still in the necropolis's walls, where trowels tease out Alpha and Omega amid the ossuaries. In the Apostolic Constitutions compiled in Antioch by 380 AD, preserving fragments of their oracular prayers that bent bars without touch. In the ground's grudging yield, archaeologists' palms black with Neronian soil, unearthing a fibula clasp bent but unbroken, perhaps Miriam's own. And now, through these words, they're here with you. Their silence shattered not by screams but by the stubborn script of survival. Because you chose immersion, chose the torchlight's tremble over the scroll's escape. You chose to witness, and witnesses are the past's pulse, keepers, the antidotes to amnesia. To bear witness means more than gaze, it means grapple. To let their vacant stares interrogate your certainties, their unyielding hymns harmonize with today's dirges. The Yazidi girls trafficked as trophies, the Uyghur veils shredded in re-education vats, the journalists caged in Turkish black sites. These stories matter because they map the machine's mutations from Nero's gardens to Gitmo's hoods, showing how power, untethered, perverts protocol into predation, turning citizens to chattel, vows to vulnerabilities. We owe the past, not pity's tears, but action's architecture. To fund digs that defy developers' bulldozers, to amplify archives where Shaw's skeptics spar with Eusebius's enthusiasts. To teach in classrooms where Tacitus trumps TikTok's tyranny. What we owe is vigilance, the vow to name the systems bureaucratic, digital, despotic, that script erasure today, ensuring no virgin's gaze goes vacant unseen. In remembering, we remember, their fragments into wholeness, our fragments into fortitude. If this narrative stirred something a chill in the gut, a fire in the chest, a question clawing for air, leave a comment below. Tell me what lodged in your throat, the machine's inexorable whir, or the hymn that outlasted it. Share the parallel that pricked you awake, the modern garden where spectacles still bloom. Ask the hard queries: how thin is the line from witness to warrior? Because these dialogues, these wrestlings with the dark, forge the bulwarks against recurrence. They're the true pyres, burning illusion to light the way. If you hold that voices like theirs merit resurrection, subscribe not for spectacle, but for the silences yet to shatter, the stories interred under empire's rubble, the resistances refusing the grave's hush. Nero reigned 14 years, erected a system schooling every future despot from Caligula's stalls to Hitler's arenas, how to choreograph cruelty as culture, perversion as policy. The template persists, photocopied in every coliseum of control.